All right, looks like we mostly have everyone's here. A very good morning, afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us this year. First of all, I would like to encourage you to turn on your camera so that we can share our face-to-face reactions, some smile, some eye contact, some familiar faces who might have bumped into us some conferences in the past. Please put on your camera if you are comfortable with that. Good day to all of you once again. It's such a great pleasure for me to have an honor to welcome you all to the fifth webinar. My name is Punyapa Buntham. I am a lecturer in English teaching, language teaching at Thammasat at Nakhon Sawan Ratchapat University in Thailand and a PhD candidate at Thammasat University, Thailand. I am the moderator for this webinar and I'll be with you throughout the program. So for your information, today, the topic is doing research in ELT by graduate students, tenacity, tears, and triumphs. And we have 5 guest speakers who are experts in their fields and passionate about sharing their expertise and PhD experiences with doing research in ELT. I am so thrilled to let you know that we are going to begin the webinar soon. And let me announce the AsiaTEFL that this year we have a dual presidency and we have 2 new presidents, Professor Suwarsi Matya and Professor Du Kyung Park. In addition, we have about 29 executive members attending the webinar. So maybe you could smile and wave your hands for us. Thank you. And congratulations on your new roles. Okay, so without further ado, to officially start off our webinar today, I would like to invite Professor Jun Kyung Park, President of AsiaTEFL, to give the welcome address.
Thank you. Well, distinguished guests, advisory board, executive council, and all my fellow members and future members of AsiaTEFL, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. This is the 5th and the last one of this year. Launched in June 2021, AsiaTEFL webinar series has become one of the most successful and powerful activities of AsiaTEFL. As president of AsiaTEFL, I'm very proud and grateful for this ever-growing event and all those who have made it possible, including our Vice President, Professor Pragasi Setutiku, and all the webinar organizing committee members. Now, let me introduce our special guest today. Right before this webinar, AsiaTEFL and IGSE, or International Graduate School of English in South Korea, had a virtual MOU signing ceremony for academic cooperation. As you can see behind me, you see this virtual background. And we have President Jae-hee Lee here with us, and he will give us a congratulatory speech later. So please welcome President Lee. Just wave your hand, President Lee. Okay, and we have 2 professors of IGSE, Professor Hae-ok Park, Head of the Department of English Education, and Professor Hoon-mil Kim, Head of the Department of Interpreting and Translation. So please wave your hand, professors. Okay, thank you for joining us. And you will see how vibrant our organization, AsiaTEFL, is through today's webinar. Well, President Madia and I, as new presidents, have set our goal for AsiaTEFL to become a must-join world-class professional association for anyone who is concerned with the teaching and learning of English as a lingua franca in Asian contexts and cultures. Exchanging and collaborating with other institutions like IGSE, who share the same goal with us, is crucial in realizing our vision. And continuing and further developing AsiaTEFL webinar series by diversifying the speakers and topics is one of our organizational strategies to achieve our goal. In our previous webinars, we have had speakers who are internationally renowned scholars with their great experience and expertise. But today, we have 5 young and restless, if I may, recent graduates or graduating students who will share their hopes and fears about their graduate studies. I am particularly excited about hearing them because they are our future leaders of AsiaTEFL, as well as in the field of ELT in Asia and the world. I'd like to express my very special appreciation to today's speakers, Mr. Julianto Sabat, Mr. Pariwat Imsard, Mr. Lukman Mai, Dr. Mirbek Kudai Bergenov, Dr. Chai Shin-wee, and our moderator, Ms. Punyapa Buntam. I truly thank you and best wishes for your talk today. AsiaTEFL is a multicultural, multilingual group of ELT professionals who work together in the spirit of AsiaTEFL, unity within diversity, diversity within unity. Now, I'd like to invite all of you here with us today to be part of this wonderful organization. Let's work together and grow together in AsiaTEFL. Well, please enjoy today's webinar and hope to see you all again at our next webinar in March 2023 and the 21st AsiaTEFL International Conference to be held in celebration of AsiaTEFL's 20th anniversary in Daejeon, South Korea, August 17th through 20th, 2023. The call for presentation proposals will be coming out soon, so please join us, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jun Kyung Park, for your inspiring welcoming speech. So now I would like to call upon President Jay Healy of IGSE International Graduate School of English to give a congratulatory address.
Yes. Hello, members of AsiaTEFL from around the world. Nice to meet you. Let me introduce myself and my school. I'm Jae-hee Lee, President of the International Graduate School of English, and shortly IGSE. It was established in 2002 as an institution specialized in English education. IGSE is just like a diamond. It's small. So our slogan, the slogan is tiny but shiny. I hope you can visit the homepage of our school as we are now recruiting new students for the spring semester next year. We have just signed the Memorandum of Understanding between AsiaTEFL and IGSE. So we'll strengthen ties and cooperation between the two institutions. I'd like to congratulate on your 2022 Webinar 5, especially congratulations to the two speakers, 2 doctors and 3 doctoral students. They are going to give presentations on doing research. As you have already experienced, academic work is an enduring process of tenacity, tears, and triumphs. Therefore, the result is even sweeter when you achieve the goal. Finally, I hope you can enjoy and sympathize with what the presenters say today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Jay Healy of IGSE, for your wonderful remarks. So ladies and gentlemen, set a few announcements before we begin the section. Once again, a gentle reminder to those who have not registered for this webinar, please do so. Regarding your questions for our speakers today during the section, please send your questions to online question platform called Mentimeter by scanning the QR code on the screen, or you can make use of the chat room in the Zoom platform. And we will select your questions and have the speakers answer your question during the Q&A time. Also, I would like to address a very important issue for everyone here. We are delighted to tell you that we will provide an e-certificate for everyone who is attending this webinar. Therefore, you will need to complete an e-form. We will display a slide at the end of this webinar where you can use the link or scan the QR code. Not to worry, we will remind you about this later. First, let's enjoy our webinar. Before we start, let me tell you how this webinar will run. The webinar will last about 2 hours. In the first round, each speaker will be given 15 minutes for presentation. I will give you a reminder in the chat box when 5 minutes remains. And that will be followed by a Q&A section after all the speakers have presented. And this will last about 20 to 25 minutes. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed speakers for today. Our first speaker will be Yulianto Sabat. Yulianto Sabat is a lecturer and a Senate member of STKIP Pakai LE Literature in Indonesia. He is recently a PhD candidate in Yogyakarta State University in Indonesia. Prior to this, he earned his MA in English education from Widya Mandala Catholic University, Ulaanbaatar in Indonesia, and his bachelor's degree from STKIP PGRI Sidoarjo in Indonesia. His research studies is in linguistic fields. Yulianto Sabat will be presenting his research studies on ICT-based model of autonomous English pronunciation learning for EFL students teacher and share with us his PhD experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our first speaker.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction, Ms. Punyapa. Good morning and good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's a great honor and a great pleasure for me to be able to present my research, my PhD research entitled Developing an ICT-based model of autonomous English pronunciation learning for the EFL student teachers. Now I'm sharing my slides. Can you read that, Ms. Punyapa?
Yes.
All right. So I'd like to make a slideshow. Okay. So I'm really sorry that I am not using the virtual background, because when I'm using that virtual background, then it's blurry in my laptop. Then I'm really sorry I didn't use that. All right. So here is the outline of my research. So I'm moving to the second slide, Ms. Punyapa, the outline of the whole research process. So can you read that?
Yes, sure.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So this is the outline of the whole research process. The students' poor pronunciation skill observable in their performance in the institution where I've been working sparked my motivation to develop an ICT-based pronunciation instruction, which allows the students to learn English pronunciation without any time and space constraints. So after having known this kind of problem, then I wrote a proposal of design-based research, which was approved by the Board of Advisors and Board of Proposal Examiners. And after having this kind of approval, then I conducted a need analysis and proposed the initial instructional model. So in the next step, then classroom action research and time triangulation and space triangulation were conducted. In this step, I also collected data by using several research instruments, which is called as classroom observation, then in-depth interview, document analysis, and focus group discussion. Then after having this kind of data, then I move on to the next step, that is qualitative data analysis and findings and discussion. Then it was end up with the conclusions. So I got the examinations last month on 20th of October. And this is a really great opportunity to share with you all about this kind of research. Well, pronunciation skills plays very crucial roles in successful oral communication, yet it's very challenging for Indonesian EFL student teachers to master. Why? Because the sound system will first pose the challenge related to some aspects. First, learning pronunciation mostly involves memory. the very little correspondence between letters and the sounds they represent. And after finding relatively consistent correspondence, they soon find exception too. This is worsened by the existence of homograph, homophone, and silent letters. To make these things more complicated, not all words are given stress, and the quality of sounds in unstressed words changes too, which is called as weak form, and adjacent sounds are blended. A possible contribution, which also make the Indonesian EFL student teachers find it hard to master English pronunciation, was that pronunciation is given very little attention in higher education. Many English departments in Indonesia deletes pronunciation subject in the curriculum or merge pronunciation subject into other related subjects. So the ideal learning model for Indonesian EFL student teachers is a model which could incrementally support their pronunciation enhancement. This could be done by using an ICT-based model of autonomous English pronunciation learning. However, the existing ICT-based pronunciation models have been criticized due to the lack of need analysis, mobility, personalization, and localization. So based on the
เข้าที่
aforementioned
เข้าที่เลยเอา
based on the aforementioned background, then here is the problem formulations. There were three research questions in this case. The first one is, what is an appropriate ICT-based model of autonomous English pronunciation learning for EFL student teachers? And the second one is, how is the model established through cycles of reinforcement of problem solution method and design principles? Third, to what extent could the established model enhance the EFL student teachers' English pronunciation skills? To answer all of these questions, then need analysis was conducted and the initial instructional model was proposed. Classroom action research, time triangulation, and space triangulation were conducted. Then in this process, I collected the data by using several research instruments such as class observation, in-depth interview, document analysis, and focus group discussion, and then analyzing the data. Then, what makes Indonesian sound system so unique? First, Indonesian is phonetic language in which there is almost perfect correspondence between letters and the sounds they represent. This is so much different from that of English, which has very little correspondence between the sounds and the letters they represent. The second one, Indonesian is syllable-timed language in which it gives nearly equal weight and time for all syllables. It's quite different from that of English that has a stress-timed language. And the next one is Indonesian does not have long vowels. So the Indonesian vowels are relatively produced in the same way. So Indonesian doesn't have these long vowels. The last one is Indonesian doesn't have a certain consonant sound, doesn't have like the sounds over there. So this all uniqueness make the Indonesian EFL students find it hard to master English pronunciations. Next, being aware of the challenges encountered by Indonesian EFL student teachers in learning English pronunciation, they need to be empowered to achieve the development of their autonomy, which will in turn enhance their intrinsic motivation and self-determination to master English pronunciation by the existence of ICT. Then what is actually autonomous learning or learner autonomy? So there have been several proponents or several experts who have already given the definitions about autonomous learning. From all the definition, it could be emphasized that autonomous learning is actually a learning method which help the student to be the decision makers toward their learning process. Then autonomous pronunciation learning. Autonomous pronunciation learning refers to a process of learning English pronunciation, which enables learners to be active and independent during the learning process, to take initiative and control on their own learning, and to be the decision makers in the efforts of improving their pronunciation skills. there have been there are several indicators in which in which learners can be called as autonomous learners. So the first one is learner agency. So in this case, the learners can make their own learning decisions. They know and they can determine what to learn, when to learn, and how to learn English pronunciation. So they are the decision makers of their own learning process. Self-efficacy. So the learners have belief in their own ability that they can accomplish a particular task accompanied with the achievement. They are confident that they can learn. The third indicator is reflection. In this case, the learners learn how to learn. So they are aware of their learning difficulties. They are able to criticize their learning process, and they can also solve the problem that they are facing during the instructional process. And the fourth is nonlinear learning. The learners can learn English pronunciation at any time and anywhere. The last one is capability. The learners can use their competency and their pronunciation skill in unfamiliar as well as familiar circumstances. Then the findings. Through the further in-depth interview, some observation, and a document analysis followed by the data analysis involving the process of triangulation and focus group discussion with the lecturers, students, and head of English department, then all the problems could be answered. The first one is about the appropriate ICT-based model of autonomous English pronunciation learning. And the second one is the process of establishing instructional model. And the last one is the model effectiveness. Then the result of the study shows that the ICT-based model of autonomous learning was designed, developed in a form of based model based on the student learning needs, which emphasized on learner agency, nonlinear learning, reflection, and capability. The instructional model was developed by cycles of reinforcement of problem solution methods and design principles, in which the establishment involved the changes of some learning steps, synthesizing relevant theories guided by the principle of pedagogy. The model, consisting of four related steps, such as exploring, practicing, collaborating, and reflecting, which was established through cycles of reinforcement. And the last finding is the mobile-based instructional model was also found to support the incremental development of students' autonomous learning, which was effectively improving the student pronunciation skills. So during the process of their learning, they had already developed their autonomous learning from the lowest level of autonomous learning to the highest one. So they start to be aware that the Indonesian sound system is very different from that of English. And in addition, the student also started to be aware of their pedagogical learning goal. Then by being aware of that pedagogical goal, then they were involved to select the learning materials, to select their learning exercises, and then they move on to the next step, what's called as intervention. So they modified the pronunciation task by themselves, and sometimes they modified with their peers through the process of discussion and creation. They felt enjoyable to learn English pronunciation through ALEPSA model. ALEPSA in this case is the instructional model that I developed. ALEPSA stands for Autonomous Learning of English Pronunciation by Sabat. Sabat is my last name. And the last one is transcendence. In this case, the students were able to correlate what they've just learned with the real world. So by using the instructional model, the students were able to move from the lowest level of autonomous learning towards the highest level of autonomous learning. Then challenges during the research process. Well, doing PhD research is a long, hard, and windy intellectual journey, which poses dynamic challenges during the research process. So there were several, there are many challenges in which I encountered during my research. The first one is time management. It was quite hard for me to be able to manage my time to work on my dissertation or to work on my research, because I need to play several different roles at the same time. So I'm a husband, a father, lecturer, and PhD student. So I need to play that kind of role. And honestly speaking, that is what quite hard for me to manage my time to work on my research. And the second challenge was that reading and synthesizing many related articles and books. Reading and synthesizing many articles and books was not an easy job to do, because it took much time to understand, to synthesize, and to relate what I had read with the research I've been working on. And the third one is writing process. So writing process was a long process, which really frustrating for me myself, because during my research I need to revise, I need to write, and there are still a lot of aspects that I need to consider during my research, during the writing of my research. Number four, uh, the process of data collection and data analysis, of course. It took much time, energy, and fun to collect the data of my research. My research was design-based research, which was aimed to develop an instructional model, which need to do some triangulation in some universities and to do focus group discussions. So this was a hard job to do so, because I need to meet with many lecturers, many head of English department. I need to set up the focus group discussion in which they had a different time. So I need to manage all those time. And it's quite hard for me. And also the process of analyzing the data. It it's quite hard for me. The next one is stress management. Of course, it happened to me. Uh, Doing the same routines, writing, reading, synthesizing. Of course, I did it every day. So it's frankly speaking, it's quite boring, and it's stressful as well. So that's I experience. And of course, the last one is funding issue, because so far I didn't have any scholarship. I need to fund myself about my studies. So it's also belongs to the challenge that I encountered during my research process. Then what I did to face those kind of challenges. So the first one is I need to be very patient and stay focused on what I wanted to achieve. I still remember when my promoters, in this case, I thanked too much to Professor Swarsemadya. She always told me that, okay, doing your research, you must do not be in a rush, do not be in a hurry, but you've got to calm yourself. You stay focused on self. In Javanese, because I'm Javanese, my professor said that, "Ojo kemerungsung." My professor said, it means that do not be in a rush. Do not be in a hurry when you were doing your research. And the next one is I need to be persistent and consistent on the research work I've been doing. The third one, build the supportive academic atmosphere. Building this supportive academic atmosphere, in this case, that I usually try to invite my seniors. Sometimes my seniors who had already got the examination, I invited to speak with him or with her through the Zoom, through the Google link. Then we talked about the research. By having this communication, then I could motivate myself that I need to accomplish my work. And sometimes I invited my colleagues to talk about uh, the progress of our research. And number four, actively consult my work to promoters. So again and again, I was so lucky, because my promoter always give me schedule. So I need to report the progress and the process after every 2 weeks. what I had read, what I had already written, what I had already done with my research. I need to report all of those things to my professor. So my professor, after that, gave me the suggestions and many insights toward my report. The next one is always appreciate what I've done toward the research progress. You know, it's quite often happened to me. I've been sitting on my chair for some hours, but I could only write just one paragraph. And although I could just write one paragraph, but I appreciate what I've been doing, because by appreciating my work, then I could have new motivation again. I need to accomplish my research, then balance my time for my family, job, and PhD research, and be open-minded and be optimistic. Be open-minded and optimistic. So here, open-minded. So I try to share my research with my colleagues, with my seniors, and the more I share, the more I got various perspectives. Then I should be open-minded about the research that I've been doing so far, and be optimistic. Be optimistic in this case that I need to make myself, I need to convince myself that I could accomplish my research. And the next one is attend the colleague's invitation in the dissertation examination, as it will help me build my motivation. What I was doing when I came to the invitation of examination was that I was imagining that I were in his or her position. I was trying to answer the questions given by the examiners. So by imagining that kind of position, then I could have more motivation that, okay, so I wrote all the questions from the examiners, and then I try to answer myself. Then, so I could imagine that I were in that position. And finally, on the 20th of October, I could get the examination. And the last one is pray. So I believe is the wise word that man proposes, God disposes. So, you know, by praying, I felt that I could think quite clearly and critically toward my research. So I always pray after doing all those things that I have already mentioned above. Well, dear colleague, I think that's all what I can present for today's webinar. Thank you very much for your participations, and I'm looking forward to have the next discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your fruitful presentation. Yuliando Sabat, okay, has showed us how pronunciation plays quite a crucial role and the effectiveness of ICT-based model in improving students' autonomous learning and their pronunciation skills. And I do believe that we all share those challenges encountered by you as a PhD students. So let me remind you again about the Q&A. If you have any questions, please leave your questions for the speaker via the online platform called Mentimeter or the chat box. Okay, and if you would like to have the presenter slide, please contact the speaker directly. And let me introduce the next speaker without further ado, Parivat Imsad. Parivat Imsad is a full-time lecturer in English language teaching at university in Thailand. He is pursuing his PhD in English language teaching at Thammasat University, Thailand. Prior to this, he earned his MA in TESOL with merit from the University of York, United Kingdom, and Bachelor of Education with honors from Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. His research interests include language assessment, intercultural communication, reflective practice, and teacher education. He is currently working on his PhD dissertation on language assessment literacy of Thai EFL University lecturers. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic he will be presenting is Immersing Myself in a PhD Study, a study on digitally mediated language assessment. Let's give a warm welcome to our next speaker, Parivat Imsad.
Thank you so much. So please allow me to share the PowerPoint. Is it on? So you can
Yes.
see my screen, right? All right. Once again, good afternoon from Thailand. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all audience from, other parts of the world. I can see a lot of people joining this webinar, right? And it is my great honor, my great pleasure to be invited to join this webinar. So I have about 15 minutes to talk, right? Which, sounds very scary because normally we as teachers, we talk for hours, right? But I'll do my best, right? I'll do my best. Here is the title of my talk, Immersing Myself in a PhD Study. I use the word immersing, right? It's not just doing, conducting, but we have to immerse ourselves in this kind of study. And my study focuses on digitally mediated language assessment. And I am Pariwat Imsat from Thammasat University, Thailand. And I have to give, sort of my credit to my supervisor as well, right? Associate Professor Dr. Supong Tangkien from Language Institute, Thammasat University. I have divided my talk into two main topics, right? Which is pretty much similar to the previous speaker. I'll talk about my research summary in brief, and then I will provide you my practical tips on, a PhD study. All right, let's get started. I'm so excited, right? All right, from my PhD study, I actually have, the motivation and inspiration behind this PhD research, and they have been developed from my personal, my educational and teaching experiences. The reason why I have to tell you this, because normally when you decide to do a PhD study, right, it should come from your interest or your motivation. Otherwise, you are going to struggle your study. And you can see that my motivation and my inspiration started off by encountering a mismatch between, of course, objectives and testing practices, right? And I also encounter what we call negative watchback, or the phenomenon that a test have an impact on teaching and learning in the way that we focus on doing a test rather than improving language performance, right? And I encountered negative watchback governed by the national examination. And also the language testing and assessment module I took during my master's degree sparked my interest in, exploring more on language testing and assessment. And the thing that I have to mention, which is the global assault of the COVID-19, which is, the focus of my study. So under these circumstances, it is vital for teachers and lecturers, right, to embrace sort of digital literacy and language assessment modalities which can correspond to the new reality. Let me give you a little bit about my background of the study. Normally, when we talk about assessment practice, right, it usually comes from knowledge and beliefs. So these two factors can have a strong influence, a profound influence on assessment practices, right? And assessment practices can have an impact on student learning. So your assessment practice decision can cause student learning, whether in a good way or a bad way, right? So teachers' assessment knowledge and beliefs might have an influence on classroom assessment practices. And the importance of assessment in promoting learning has put the emphasis on language assessment in the classroom. So we can see that assessment knowledge, assessment belief, and assessment practices are very important in the classroom practices. As a result, language teachers or language lecturers are expected to be, I would use the word proficient and skilled in various elements of assessment, including assessment literacy, in order to experience and accomplish the intended assessment goals. And another thing that we have to be realizing, right, which is what we call the 21st century skills, right? So as the first decade of the 21st century skills comes to an end, it seems fitting to dig more into what are some what we call the 21st century skills, given their direct impact on teaching and learning environments. Despite the advancement of ICT or technology, right, there has not been a significant shift in language assessment practices at least not until the COVID-19 began its worldwide assault. So it is probable that such a dramatic shift in assessment practices reveals how difficult it has become to assess our students' performance in the classroom, right? Because some universities still adopt sort of technological tools or gadgets in assessing your students. So it would be more beneficial to investigate our digitally mediated language assessment literacy and assessment practices in order to establish a more comprehensive view of teacher language assessment literacy, which will broaden their knowledge in the hope of promoting students' language learning. So we can see the term assessment knowledge, right? Assessment beliefs and assessment practices. So these three terms play a vital role in my study. And I add digitally mediated as well, because in the next normal era or in the post-COVID-19, we tend to adopt technological tools in our classroom. So I want to explore more about this. And let me give you a little bit about digital assessment literacy. When we talk about digital assessment literacy, it is actually a distinct facet of assessment literacy. And the teacher's role will be an assessor in a technology-rich context. So we have three different levels of digital assessment literacy, which is a basic, intermediate, and advanced, right? Because we have little time, I'm going to give you some key point about this one. So to make it simple, the more the student involvement, the more advanced the teacher digital assessment literacy is. And the more alternative assessment methods employed, the more advanced teachers' digital assessment literacy is. So we can see two terms, right, which is student involvement and alternative assessment. So these two terms play a very important role in digitally mediated classroom assessment practices. So you need, student involvement and you need alternative assessment. All right. So I'm going to provide you a little bit about my key takeaway messages, because my study is still in the process of data analysis, right? I still analyze some sort of, data collected. So I can find some emerging findings from my study, which is, the key takeaway messages here, right? So you have to ask yourself, how much do you know about language assessment? Why? Because knowledge, right? Knowledge can have a strong influence on beliefs and practices, whether you will decide what kind of practices you will adopt in your classroom, right? So you have to ask yourself, how much do you know about language assessment? And you have to think about what resources are available in your context and what devices do your students require to have. Because when we talk about digitally mediated language assessment, right, we need to have sort of digital tools. So you have to ask yourself whether which devices do your students require to have. And if you ask me which practices are the best, I don't have any answer for you, because nothing is the best, right? It depends on your context. So you have to be flexible. So knowing your context, your readiness, your students' readiness, your own readiness, realistic tasks and student performance is a key, right? And you have to allow your student to improve their English without penalty. And also, normally, I'm pretty sure that, if you teach sort of foundation course, right, you have to follow the course book that every section uses, right? But again, you can also develop your own assessment tasks, right? And teacher develop assessment tasks can be added to supplement the course to maximize the student potential, right? Or to maximize the student language performance. And I would suggest you adopt sort of, performance-based or alternative assessment in the new normal era, right? And the primary purpose of assessment is to improve student learning. I really like this kind of quotes, right? So we have to do what we believe is helping our students to improve their learning and language performance, right? So we want to improve their learning, not to judge them right away. Okay, so here's a brief, sort of my research summary in progress, right? Let's move to the next one, which is my main part. Obviously, we still have time, right? The useful tips on how to graduate as planned, right? Normally, when we talk about PhD study, it is laboring. We just this kind of word, laboring, right? It is tiring. It is fatigue, right? It takes your energy a lot. So how can we, how can we graduate as planned? I have some tips for you. First, you have to define your goal, right? Why? Why do you have to study your PhD? Why do you have to pursue your PhD? And you have to determine how PhD means to you. Is it important or is not, right? If you think your PhD is not important, it is not worth pursuing, right? So PhD, normally when we talk about PhD, a PhD is academic that has learned more and more about layers and layers until you know everything about nothing. Pretty complex, right? So we learn a lot and then we realize that we know nothing, right? And for some people, a PhD could be a permanent head damage, right? It could damage your head to some extent. So I'm pretty sure, the previous speaker would have this kind of experience as well, right? Like me. And the pursuit of PhD is enduring, daring adventure. I would say it is an adventure, right? It's not just a very easy journey, and it is enduring adventure. So some practical tips for you, as pretty much similar to the previous speaker, right? You have to read and read. You have to read a lot, right? Read to prepare for the class and read to review after the class, okay? And also we can have peer learning. We can learn from your colleagues. We can learn from your PhD mates, right? You can form a group of classmates and then help each other to learn. And you can talk to your senior, right? They have, walked in pretty much in your shoes before. So talk to your senior friends and, they might be able to help you about some issues, right? And you need to talk to your supervisor, right? Your supervisor can supervise you. Your advisor can give some advice to you, right? Always keep your supervisor updated with your project, right? He or she is there to help, right? When you have some problem, when you have some struggles or difficulties, talk to them, right? They are like your comfort zone, right? And be organized, right? Establishing a routine and plan for your PhD can help you overcome some, challenges and relax, right? You need to be relaxed. Get to relax, get to travel, let your body and soul relax. Sound like you are getting massage, right? You have to be relaxed anyway. And some don'ts for you. I have some don'ts for you. The first one, don't compare. Never compare, right? Don't compare your PhD project to other people's. They are all different, right? We do different projects. Why we have to compare, right? Don't compare, because when you compare to others, it sort of, make you feel stressed, right? Stressful to some extent. Don't put much pressure, right? Don't feel pressure to work 24/7. We are not a convenience store that opens 24/7, right? We need to get some sleep. We need to relax, right? As I mentioned, and we all love sleeping, and I do, right? When you are tired, go to sleep, right? And don't rush the process, okay? Don't rush the process. What I mean by don't rush the process, you have to trust in the timing of your life, right? It can help you to trust and accept what is happening instead of trying to change it, okay? When you trust in the timing of your life, it means that instead of trying to control everything or change things for yourself, you trust that what is happening will get you where you need to be, okay? So don't compare, don't put much pressure, and don't rush the process. And here's my own practices. I usually spend 1 hour a day working on my PhD project, right? I cannot work like 5 consecutive hours in a row, right? Which can harm my energy. So I usually spend 1 hour a day working on my project, usually every day, right? Every day, 1 hour a day. And you have to research on what you want to know, not what other people like to do. It should be your interest, right? And always have plans A, B, C, or D, or so on, right? Sometimes it never get as planned, right? And when I am stressed, I sleep. Okay, sleep heals everything, believe me, right? So last word for you here, planning is everything. Always thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, right? And be ready for the failure and develop a research network and talk to others about your interested topic. Like this webinar, right? It can, build your network in researching and teaching, concerning TEFL or teaching English as foreign languages. So that's all for my presentation. I'm so good at timing, right? Thank you so much.
That was a very comprehensive presentation from Parivat Imsat from Thailand. So far, Parivat Imsat has walked us through his PhD journey, his research study focusing on Thai EFL University lecturers' digitally mediated language assessment, and his thought-provoking key takeaway message and some useful tips on how to graduate as planned. I'm positive that these will be useful for our participants, as I believe that there are a number of PhD students attending this webinar. Okay, so let me give you a very quick reminder again that each participant will be given an opportunity to fill out a form for an e-certificate at the end. So please do stay with us for further updates until the end. And I would like to remind our participants again to post your questions to the online question platform called Mentimeter by scanning the QR code on the screen, or you may use the chat room on Zoom, okay, to post your questions or some feedbacks, recommendations, comments for our speakers, okay? Yes, so now come to our third speaker for the day. Please allow me to introduce Lukman Mayi. Mr. Lukman Mayi is a lecturer in TESOL at the Faculty of Liberal Arts, Princess of Narathivas University in Thailand. He earned his bachelor's degree in English from Valailak University, Thailand, and his master's degree in TESOL from York St. John University in the UK. In 2017, he received a PhD scholarship from the Royal Thai government. He is now doing his PhD in TESOL research at the University of Stirling, UK, and in his final year of completing his thesis. His project is titled Teaching English in a Christian Mission, Practices and Perspectives of Missionaries and Thai Learners in Thailand. Mr. Lukman is interested in research into ELT, native speakerism, politics of English in a globalized economy, language and religion. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our third speaker, Lukman Mayi, who will be presenting Researching in Times of COVID-19, My Struggles for Data Collection and How They Moved My PhD Forward. Please welcome.
Hello to you. It is such a great pleasure for me. First of all, can you see my slide? I'm just concerned.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So right. A very good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are. So thank you very much for joining in our webinar today. And I'm a third person who will tell you a little bit about my research and also something related to my struggle when I did my research during the COVID time. So yes, as you can see from my title on the screen here, my title for today is Researching in Times of COVID-19, My Struggles for Data Collection and How I Moved My PhD Forward. So might be slightly different from the Parivat, who was very practical, talking about the PhD journeys, but of course I will share some of my experiences with regards to my PhD struggle and how I moved my PhD forward. So first of all, my name is Lukman Mayi, so you can call me Luke. And oh, it's not moving. Okay, so I'm not really sure whether you know where I am studying. So this is the a very brief introductions to the University of Stirling, which is located in Scotland, and you can see the university pictured and the castle. We've got a very nice castle there as well. So I really miss the cold over there, and also friends. And now in my final year, and now back to Thailand to be a lecturer. And this is the my workplace, Princess of Narathiwat University, Thailand. So it is located in the southernmost province of Thailand, and not too far from Malaysia. So where I live is very much multicultural, multi-religious, and contextual part of Thailand. So yes, and that's all. Today, before we go, I'd like to outline my presentation at first within 15 minutes. I hope that I could finish all that in time. So first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my research area, what my research is about and why I am doing this research. And secondly, I would tell you about my COVID-19 impacts, which is the main impact on my research. I would tell you what I originally planned to do and how COVID-19 affected my research, and why I decided to carry on doing this research despite all the struggles. And the third one, I would tell you my data collection as a consequence of COVID-19, what data I successfully collected, how the data answered my research questions, and how I have analyzed my data. And the fourth one, I would give you a quick finding, which would help you as well, in terms of the understanding what I am doing. So I would tell you just one of the themes that I have written in my thesis. And the last one would be Q&A. If you have questions or reflections or any comments, please feel free to ask me at the end of the my presentation or later on. So yes, so overview of my research area. So what I focus on is the missionaries or missionary organizations who are traveling overseas for preaching their spiritual and religious concepts, or in other words, we would say that like they go outside their own country to bring people to Christ through messages. So in other words, sometimes we call like evangelism or proselytization, which is a very big phenomenon that has been related to historical concept, that they came to other countries to as part of the colonization, for example. Also, they provided schools or hospitals, at the time. And now within the colonization, they also travel to other countries and tell people about Christ. And also they have so many programs, for example, like humanitarian programs or outreach programs, which is related to going to help others or the poor people, for example. And part of the English language teaching, for example, why is it really related to missionary organizations? Because English is now as a global language, and now, as we know, English has been in importance for people, especially younger people. And now it's not just about what is related to our ideology, but it comes to practices and policy, for example. And sometimes we can come up with the term like neoliberalism, where English is used as a soft skill. And in Thailand, for example, there is a demand for people to use more English so that they can be employed in a global market. And then what missionaries are doing? Missionaries have recognized that the world's hunger for language teaching offers them as the opportunity to teach more than English. And that's why it creates a door for missionaries to use language as the evangelistic tool, for example, and English may develop students' interest in Christ. So that's why they go through the door offering this as a service, and it becomes kind of like a marketplace for the missionary, or in other words, that it becomes the product of missionary work. And this is what I'm interested in. I need just to tell you as well that this is very much related to English as the political issue, which is related to the power of the language. So as you know, that the power of language comes from the speakers. When we talked about English, for example, we also talked about English as a lingua franca, native, non-native English. We talked about the world Englishes that allows more voices to those who use English in the diversified community. And missionaries usually come from powerful countries like the US or the UK, and they use English as the first language. And that's why when they go to the areas where English is not used as the first language and there is a demand, then they can offer language teaching as their service. So why I'm interested in this research? So as a global scale, scholars in the field of TESOL have been aware of the use of English is but we do not know much about that I found online. So you can see here that the missionary website uses the words creative and access nations, where they talked about introducing people who are not interested in Christianity by using language, which is called English. And if you see it here, it says that obedience requires creativity. Most of those entering creative access nations teach English, but other vocational skills provide a means of access also. English speakers from North America are in great demand. Your ability to share your language and Christian truth make you valuable. So English is now used as a tool to gain access to non-Christian countries, for example, like Thailand. So next one, despite the influx of missionaries organization offering English in different parts of the world, we lack evidence-based research into language teaching and Christian mission in TESOL. So for the last 20 years, only a small amount of research have been found on the ERIC. So teaching English as a missionary language, evangelical Christians and English language teaching, for example, and Christian witness and respect for persons are three of the many that started talking about the moral issues and ethical issues with regard to the missionaries organization. And there are 4 books that have been published. So the first one is called Christian and Critical English Language Educators in Dialogue, which talks about why missionaries want to use English as a way to gain access to the non-Christian communities. And it's more like kind of trying to create a dialogue between TESOL scholars who believe in Christianity and TESOL scholars who don't believe in religion or other religions. And this one is not related to English, the evidence-based research. It's just more about a dialogue. But the second and the fourth one are related to research, but focuses on the identity, for example, and also the third one is about the church, which is actually located in Poland, and the last one is about spirituality and English language teaching, the way in which that how spirituality helps people improve the language. So that's the main one. And why I'm interested in this is because missionaries that teach in English in Thailand, both in and outside academic institutions, we don't actually have much research that talks about it. We usually focus on the mainstream education and language teaching, but we barely talked about how English is used outside mainstream education in Thailand. So and this is what I'm interested in. So my PhD project, I started doing the pilot study, focusing on the linguistic ethnographic study on teaching English as a missionary language. So I just went back to Thailand and I went to school, Islamic school, where missionaries came to my community and also introduced themselves as somebody who could provide language teaching regardless of the English teaching qualification, and they used their nativeness or being a native speaker as a way to help students or those disadvantaged areas who might not know much about English and they want to learn English with those who speak English as a first language. However, during the COVID time, I plan to go back to the community again, but because of the COVID-19, I was not able to carry on my research because of all of the classes were suspended. So at first, I planned to do ethnographic fieldwork at one of the churches in Thailand to observe free English class with the missionaries. But I couldn't do that because of the COVID-19 at the time. So at the time, I talked to my supervisors and we decided to just focus on the immigrant perspective of the missionaries teaching English in Thailand and the Thai learners. So, and that was the time when I decided to just interview just missionaries and the Thai people who learn English with the missionaries. So how I did was I decided my study based on phases. The first phase, I focus on the image perspective of different kinds of missionaries who taught English in Thailand, and I wanted to know about their experiences. And also during the second phase, during the time they still closed their schools and classes, but they started running teaching English on Zoom. So I decided to observe their classes online. And that was a time when I recruited some Thai learners who learn English with the missionaries for more than 4 years, and they are all Buddhists. And I interviewed them as well. So yes, I genuinely talked about access to Thai people, and in this research, what we know is that they don't seem to hide their identity as the missionary. And my interest was like, okay, so if they don't hide their identity, they are quite honest about their identity, and why these Thai people still went there and learn English. And then even though these missionaries convinced them in terms of whether they wanted to know more about Christianity, but these Thai people remained Buddhist, and they preferred not to become the Christian. So because of the time, I just want to focus on my theme, which is one of the themes here, called Leaving the Door Open Approach. So I talked about the ethical aspects and the way how English class was organized by the missionaries. So this is the concepts that after I interviewed and did the analysis. And then from here, you can see the structure of the English class. So the missionaries started with the before class player. So they started telling people about praying, and they started praying, and mostly the students were Buddhists, and they using their Christian prayer as a way to open the class. And then the second part is the English lesson that they started teaching English. So in my study, the missionaries did not use spiritual integration in the English classroom. In other words, that when they taught English, so they just taught English. But after they finished English for the 45 minutes, the missionaries would ask students to leave the class if they were not interested in spiritual thought, because in about 15 minutes time, they would start talking about spiritual thought, which were related to their own belief. And that was a moment when students started feeling that, okay, so they kind of, respected, the missionaries told them first, they didn't just, force the Thai people to just come to the classroom and injected the spiritual thoughts. So these Thai people felt fine with the learning with the missionaries, because missionaries will fetch them. But at the end of the class, of course, they would start talking about whether people wanted to know more about the Bible. So if some people were interested, they would lead students to the other class. So I just want to skip all this because of the time. So, but from here, I can conclude that the approach that they use seemed to serve both students who wants to learn English only and learn English with the explicit religious content. So this showed the transparency, because sometimes without research, we use our own assumption that these missionaries wanted to teach English because they wanted people to become Christian, but it's not as simple as that. It's not as straightforward as that. They also show themselves as the missionary, and also because they could use English as a first language, which is something that we criticizing, because they don't have the language qualification, but they use their nativeness. But from their own perspective, they also think that because of their ability to use English as a third language, it's part of God's plan. Like, they see English as the talent. The reason why English has become global, because it's what God plans to do. And the reason why we can use English as a first language is also another way for us to gain access to the non-Christian communities and tell them about God. But still, students seem not to feel forced that they wanted to learn about Christianity. They said that these missionaries were nice, and in terms of the conviviality, that these missionaries respect them and also told them about what was next. So they felt fine with that. But of course, there were times which I call like the gray area, that they started talking about Christianity, which is something related to their identity. If we are interested in English, we would also want to talk about English. If we are interested in football, we would talk about football. So that's something related to identity and interests. But yes, that's generally the main concept of that. And the reason why I did this research, I wanted to carry on because there is a lack of evidence, and I would encourage you to explore English language teaching outside mainstream education, for example, like tutorial schools, or maybe on TikTok, where English is taught by so many people who are not lecturers, and and we want to know about them. So that is all about it. If you have questions, or you can ask me more later, or you can email me. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much, Lukman Maryi, for your informative and interesting presentation. So far, in a nutshell, Lukman Maryi has explained why he focuses his research on ELT and Christian missions. And also, we cannot deny that COVID-19 significantly affect the data collection process for every PhD student all around the world. And I do believe that his presentation sparked your interest in doing some research in ELT outside the mainstream. Okay, so everybody, ladies and gentlemen, let me give you a very quick reminder again that if you have any questions, feedbacks, suggestions, or comments, you can post it online on the Mentimeter platform or in the chat box in the Zoom, okay? Or yes, you can scan the QR code showed on the screen here, okay, to leave some notes for our keynote speakers. And please stay tuned with that until the end, because the e-certificates will be provided at the end of the webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, not to waste any time, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Merbek Kudai-Berkanov. Merbek Kudai-Berkanov is an assistant professor at the Institute for Language Education and Research in Seoul National University of Science and Technology in South Korea. He earned his PhD in TESOL from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies in South Korea. His research interests include teacher education, teacher identity, language acquisition, and country image. So without further ado, please give us a warm welcome to Dr. Mirbek Kudai-Gurbanov, who will be presenting his research study on professional identity tensions in EFL P-Service teachers, a collective case study of 3 international students in South Korea.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Can you guys see the slide? Okay. Once again, hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying today's webinar. I am definitely enjoying it as I'm learning a lot from the graduate students speaking today. And my name is Mirbek. I am an assistant professor at Seoul National University of Science and Technology. And today I'm really excited to see this audience and share my experiences of doing research as a graduate student. So the talk that I will be offering today is about a study carried out with Dr. Lee, my supervisor, to explore the intersections of professional identity and international education. First, I will briefly explain what this research was about and why it is important. Then I will talk about what we did as researchers and what we found and what implications the study has to offer. Additionally, I will share my own experiences of difficult and challenging times during grad school and offer some recommendations on how to make it through your graduate program. So speaking of the research itself and its importance, we depart from the idea that becoming and being a teacher is a complex process, which really involves a constant interaction between personal and contextual differences. This interaction, however, can be especially challenging to international pre-service teachers because their experiences, beliefs, and expectations about becoming and being a teacher may often be in conflict with what is relevant to the teaching profession in the host context. Such conflicts, of course, are emotionally challenging and often result in professional identity tensions, disempowering pre-service teachers. If these tensions are not properly understood and handled, they can have a negative impact on the lives of pre-service teachers and even cause them to doubt about having a teaching career. So the study probed into such tensions experienced by 3 international students, Gina, Janet, Samir. These are pseudonyms. These participants were graduate students here in Korea in the Department of TESOL, and they came here under a government-sponsored scholarship. So the study analyzed the participants' lived experiences through their reflective writing, interviews, and drawings, as well as other related documents. And the study showed that their professional identity tensions were mainly associated with institutional, discursive, and regulatory forces residing in the country. So what we did as researchers was we conducted multiple interviews with the participants, collected their reflective journal entries, admission essays, and drawings about how they perceive themselves in the host country. The drawings were, I guess, the most interesting part because, well, initially we didn't really plan to, ask for drawings, but as we progressed through, interviews and the analysis of their essays, we realized that their perceptions of themselves within the host country was something really interesting and something worth looking deeper into. So we asked them to draw how they saw themselves in Korea as English teachers. Excuse me. Okay. And additionally, we conducted consultations with 2 faculty members and reviewed visa regulations and consulted 2 immigration office representatives to better understand the interplay between, professional identity tensions and the reality in the host country. So the data were analyzed through the lens of cognitive dissonance theory, and we arrived at 4 overarching themes of tension. So in particular, we realized that language of instruction was really a source of tension for the participants. And this is because the TESOL program where the participants were studying, it really emphasized Korean rather than English. And the international pre-service teachers expected their program to be in English because it's an English teacher training program. However, having to attend courses in Korean really caused them a great deal of tension because they perceived English medium of instruction as a professional development need. But because that was not provided, they really, doubted themselves as future English teachers. We also found that 2 of the participants, Gina and Janet, experienced a tension of wanting to engage in practical training while actually being exposed to research-oriented training. This is also interesting because, the graduate program was so much research-driven, and the personal expectations that the participants had about what kind of training they would go through emphasized the practical aspect. They thought they would learn about how to teach, students of certain age. They thought they would learn about, different approaches and methodologies to teaching. But as they shared with me, all they were exposed to was, research, a lot of reading, and they were expected to come up with their own research, which didn't fully align with their objectives, and therefore their views of themselves were really challenged. All 3 participants experienced conflicts between their personal ideas of an English teacher and the local beliefs that unfairly overemphasize native speaker standards. I think this has some relevance to what Luke was talking about a few minutes ago. In Korea, there is a belief that a good English teacher is not necessarily someone with qualifications, but someone who has this, like Luke said, a natural talent, where English is your first language. So if you are an English teacher or you're studying to become an English teacher and you're not a native speaker, then you really have to deal with this dominant discourses that overemphasize native speakerness. And this discourse really challenged our participants as well. And they really doubted about, being a teacher even after graduation. And one, perhaps the most important tension had to do with a denial of access to teaching despite relevant qualifications. This is something more regulatory. It really has to do with the laws that are exercised here in Korea. And the law says non-native speakers of English, non-Korean, non-native speakers of English are not legally allowed to teach English in Korean public schools and private institutions. And because these participants really aspired to become English teachers in the host context too, they were not really allowed to do that. And it really made them question their legitimacy, in light of these existing legal regulations that prohibited them to teach English. So in terms of implications or in terms of things to consider, the study really shows that teacher education programs should consider English as a medium of instruction and maintain a better balance between theory and practice so that they're better able to assist international pre-service teachers of English. This also reflects the needs of the local Korean pre-service teachers as well, but the study was specifically focused on foreigners, and it really seems that it would be a good idea if English was really used as a medium of instruction to better assist pre-service teachers in their professional development, and a better balance between theory and practice. The study also showed that local discourses of an English teacher unfairly overemphasize native speaker standards, and therefore some action should be taken to create counter discourses to help non-native pre-service teachers reimagine themselves more positively. Studying to be a teacher was the thought that you will not be perceived as a legitimate teacher, or was the thought that you would constantly have to deal with the idea of, native speaker, non-native speaker, is really a challenging thing. And there's a need for counter discourses. Some examples of counter discourses could be associated with, ideas of multilingualism or multi-competence, because foreigners that arrive here in Korea, they're fluent in their own native language. They also learn Korean, they're fluent in English, and oftentimes they're fluent in many other languages too. So it would be one way to, counter those dominant discourses by emphasizing their, multilingual competence. Well, when it comes to me personally, I kind of relate a lot to this as well, because I am a non-native speaker of English myself, and I'm in the field of English education. And one counter discourse that I have created for myself is basically to conceptualize myself not in terms of native and non-native dichotomy, but more in terms of a transnational identity that has multilingual competence and knows what it means to learn a language and can share a lot with his students. And this really helps me think of myself more positively in my daily interactions with students and with other, native speaker counterparts. And also there seems to be a very flagrant systemic contradiction between two very important processes. And these processes are, on the one hand, there's, Korean government that provides so many government scholarships to international students that want to become English teachers. But on the other hand, the same government denies them access to legal employment. And considering this critically would really be a good thing to do. I am running out of time, and therefore I will quickly go through some of the challenges I experienced and perhaps recommendations as well. I think one of the biggest challenges had to do with conceptualizing the study, and I'm sure a lot of other master's and PhD students have the same problem. I think it's important to really read a lot, like the first speaker mentioned today, and attend a lot of classes to really be able to conceptualize your study. I was going to share my experience here, but I think I'll just go to the next challenge. Handling subjectivity throughout the project was extremely difficult for me. I was very subjective in my data collection and data analysis, mainly because it's a qualitative study too, and it was really hard for me to negotiate this challenge and the departmental expectation that minimal subjectivity is what we are going towards. And I just embraced subjectivity with the idea that there is no right code, there is no right interpretation, and it's important to be able to use your own identity as a tool for research, which I did. And then I had my participants do member check to validate the interpretations that I came up with. And addressing conflicting reviewer comments. When you guys, some of you are about to graduate soon, you'll probably be getting a lot of reviewer comments from other professors, and sometimes their comments may contradict. Stay calm. Again, the first speaker mentioned today, and consult your advisor and try to deal with the conflicting reviewer comments, but don't forget that you are a knowledgeable person too, so you have a voice. You can rebut the comments. You can reflect the comments in the revisions too, but you can also rebut them. And very briefly, make sure that you design your study plan that aligns with your research objectives. Attend the classes and the courses that will help you move towards your final PhD dissertation or master's dissertation. Make a habit of reading and writing regularly. Reading is really powerful and writing is extremely important. And take full advantage of what your graduate school has to offer, whether it's the library, access to academic journals, memberships, and whatever you can use. I think with this, I will wrap up my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your insightful presentation, Dr. Mirbek Kudai-Birkenhoff, and for your moral support for encouraging, empowering, and sharing us as a PhD students. And so far, okay, Mr. Mirbek broadened our horizon with his PhD research, focusing on professional identity tensions experienced by 3 international students who came to Korea to study in TESOL in South Korea, and some practical tips for the PhD students. Okay, so just a quick reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, feedbacks, or comments, please click into the link provided in the chat box or scanning the QR code sharing on the screen. Okay. And please stay tuned until the end of the webinar, because there will be time for photo section and there will be time for the e-certificate waiting for you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for our last speaker, Dr. Chai Soon-Yu. Dr. Chai Soon-Yu is currently an assistant professor at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. She holds a bachelor degree of education in TESL from the University of Sri Lanka, and she read for her master and PhD degree at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Prior to venturing into teaching in a higher education context, she served as an EFL teacher at the prestigious international school, both at the primary and secondary levels. Her research experience includes research in examining creativity, developing a mentoring framework for teacher creativity, student language learning beliefs, teaching methodology, English language pronunciation, as well as a material development and evaluation. And she has also published in peer-reviewed journals. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the last presenter's presentations. Please welcome Dr. Chai Soon-Yu.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, please bear with me. Usually that's the disadvantage of being the last speaker, because the listeners will all be losing their passion and spirit, right? But please bear with me, and I promise that it won't take long, right? So let me just quickly share my screen. All right, so are you able to see my screen? Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone, and I am Soon-Yu from the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, and now I'm working in the university. I also graduated from the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, and it's my honor to share with you my PhD research. And in my PhD, I developed a taxonomic framework for creativity, and the research was done in the higher education context. So the focus of this presentation would be, I will be sharing with you one phase of my study. And my study, it wasn't situated specifically in an ELT context, but it does have implications in the ELT context. So I would share with you about the implications of it. And I will also be sharing with you the experiences in my PhD journey. Okay, so the first question that I would like to ask of you is that, are you creative? So if I were to ask you to rate your own creativity on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the least creative and 10 being most creative, how are you going to rate yourself? And when you rate yourself, think about the reason why you are rating yourself in such a way, because your justification will most likely be representing or symbolizing your understanding of creativity. Okay. So what is creativity then? There are many questions around the concept of creativity. Some people would be asking, are we born creative, or is it something that can be developed? Is creativity limited to the arts and it's not relevant to the science? Is it about coming up with something entirely new? Or is it a moment of inspiration, like the aha moment? Or is it actually a conscious cognitive endeavor? But whatever it is, we have to acknowledge and recognize that creativity is a multifaceted concept that has various definitions. And why creativity? Out of so many topics, why did I choose to do creativity? Why not criticality? That's because in the 21st century, creativity has been recognized as one of the essential skills, not just for individual progress, but also for the societal progress. And it is a skill to cope with crisis. So look at pandemic, COVID-19. In fact, the webinar series itself that we are attending today is a result of creativity to cope with the lack of opportunities for professional development during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is a skill to achieve healthy social well-being. And it is also a skill for for effective communication through effective use of language play. So because of these different purposes of creativity and the importance of it, we can see that creativity is a problem-solving process. And this is how I position creativity in my study. I look at it from a problem-solving point of view, and I look at problems as the catalysts for creativity. And what is creativity? It is the ability to generate ideas that are novel and useful for a purposeful initiative. And it is always related to solving a problem. And what is a problem? A problem can take in many forms. It can mean an unexplained situation, and it can refer to the need for improvement. It can mean the need for immediate attention or action. It could also refer to the failure to accomplish certain things, and therefore we need creativity to address those problems. In our research, there are some problems that we wanted to solve, right? So in my study, it's the problems in creativity in higher education context that I wanted to address. So first, there was an overemphasis of criticality over creativity in the higher education context. Well, it is fine to emphasize criticality, but in a higher education context, we cannot forget that our role is to ask new questions, is to find out new solutions to problems, and also to generate new knowledge. So how can we not emphasize creativity in that sense? And based on research, in a higher education context nowadays, uniformity and conformity are still promoted. And there seems to be a lack of understanding of creativity among higher education lecturers in the higher education context. And these are the problems that I attempted to address in my study. And therefore, my aim in my research was to develop a guide for creativity for educators and students, for them to understand creativity and to apply creative strategies to solve problems. How did I do that? My study was a mixed method design study, and it involved 4 phases. The first phase was to do a synthesis of literature review to construct a prototype taxonomic framework. Then after that, I went through subsequent phases to verify that framework through the use of survey and interviews with lecturers and students to understand how they perceived creativity and how they perceived the relevance of the framework that I developed. And after that, I tested my framework out with undergraduate students through a problem-solving task. So what did I do was I got the students to solve a task without the framework first. And then I asked them to solve the problem again using my framework, just to see whether the framework actually made a difference in facilitating the creative process. And in this study and this presentation, I will only focus on the first phase of my research. The first phase of my research was to address the question of what are the features that made up the prototype taxonomic framework for creativity. To develop a framework, we will first need to identify the features first. So I did it through a synthesis of review of literature, and I selected 65 materials, and out of that was 44 empirical studies, 19 non-empirical studies, and 2 blogs. There were 4 steps that were involved. The first step was I searched for theories, frameworks, taxonomies of creativity, and previous research on creativity in various disciplines. And this was to identify different features of creativity in a comprehensive manner. And after that, I categorized these features into categories. And from there, I then generated 5 propositions for creativity, which I would talk about later. And within each proposition, I then identified features within the proposition. And this is the processes that were involved in the process of identifying the features. So throughout these processes, at first, when I did the review of literature, I identified 264 features with different features captured in different propositions. And from 264 features, it was then reduced to 49 features, then finally reduced to 24 features. And when I was talking about the features being reduced, I don't mean that I was doing it through randomly throwing out features. It was actually going through a systematic reduction process. So this is the process. The reduction process involves 3 methods, 3 ways. First is features with the same term and with the same definition, then I'll merge them as one. Features with different terms, but they share the same definition, would then be merged into one term. For example, relevance and appropriateness, they meant usefulness. So I merged these 2 together and term it as usefulness. Then features with the same term but different definitions were then named a new term for each. For example, elaboration has got 2 meanings based on the literature. So to better represent the 2 meanings of elaboration, I created another term. So there were 2 terms. I used the first term, co-constructive discussion, to represent one definition, and elaboration to represent another definition. So this was the process of identifying the key features and to reduce it to 24 features in the end for my taxonomic framework for creativity. And I came up with 5 propositions of creativity that actually form or that serve as the foundation, theoretical foundation that underpin the taxonomic framework. First, it was the mental proposition. It refers to the mental processes for creativity. And the trait proposition refers to the personality traits that facilitate creativity. The context proposition refers to the contextual conditions to influence creativity. The outcome refers to the types of outcomes being reproduced, and the value proposition refers to the significance of a creative outcome or output. And when these propositions were organized together, this is how the interconnection among these propositions were represented. In other words, it means that creativity is a set of conscious actions that can be facilitated by the trait factors, the contextual factors, the mental factors, and these intertwining factors would then lead to an outcome, and each creative outcome then contains a value. And these propositions form the definition of creativity of my study. And to simplify that, to summarize that, creativity is a complex phenomenon that does not only focus on the outcome and the value, because usually when we talk about creativity, we talk about, oh, how original is that, right? But it's more than that. It is also taking into account the mental, the trait, and the contextual factors of it. And the comprehensive view of creativity in my study is something that is the novelty I offer that is different from the definitions offered in the literature. This is the way I organized the framework, the propositions, and I would like to highlight the fundamental features of this framework, which are governed by the 6 creative strategies. And why did I want to emphasize this is because these strategies are the features that educators and students would use to exercise creativity. And other than that, all those factors are the supporting factors to exercise these actions. So how did I organize these 6 strategies? It was organized according to the level of creativity, meaning creativity can be in a form of replication, imitation, transfer, characterization, transformation, and creation. So replication is the strategy that requires the least creativity, and creation is a strategy that requires the most level of creativity. And this was not the finalized framework, right? Because this is just the first phase of study, and it subsequently went through other phases of study to finalize the taxonomic framework. So how can the framework be applied in an ELT context? So it can be applied in several ways based on the 5 propositions of creativity that I came up with in my study. So from the mental perspective, we need to design activities that allow opportunities for students to exercise different creative strategies. We need to allow students to replicate, to implicate, to transfer, and also to create something. And we need to instill traits that facilitate creativity. We need to help them to become open, to become tolerant for ambiguity. And we need to also create a conducive classroom environment for developing creativity. And we need to recognize and identify different types of creative outputs produced by the students. And we need to recognize and acknowledge personal and the more groundbreaking ideas students came up with. It is not about the most creative ideas. It is about how students actually took it step by step from being not so creative to becoming more creative. So we need to recognize all the very small milestones in creativity. So challenges. Well, I think I resonate with all the other speakers in terms of the challenges of the PhD journey. And personally, I feel that on top of the many challenges, I felt that persevere is not easy because it's a constant problem-solving process. This problem, you have just solved one problem, another problem would arise. So to persevere throughout the 3 to 4 years of study and to look at the same study for 3 to 4 years is not easy. Then how to solve that? Well, I believe that every problem has a solution. Be creative. So someone who is doing a research on creativity from the problem-solving perspective needs to believe that every problem has a solution, and you just need to be creative with it and explain it from the 5 propositions of creativity developed from my study. What we can do is that from the mental perspective, we could be aware that a problem can be solved using different creative strategies. We can be replicating a solution, we can be imitating a solution, or creating a whole new solution for your own problem. And we should exercise openness and optimism. And I think Sabat actually mentioned this as well. And we need to create a peer support system for ourselves because environment, contextual factors play a role, and we need to build a good rapport with our supervisors. And we need to recognize that whatever we have produced, right, is a form of achievement, no matter whether the idea is concrete or not. And lastly, we need to recognize and acknowledge every small and big achievements or milestones that we have achieved, because we need to celebrate every single milestone that we achieved throughout the PhD study in order to persevere throughout the journey. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chaisen Yu, for your thought-provoking and insightful presentation. So far, okay, that's the timer. So far, Dr. Chaisen Yu introduced us with her PhD research study aimed at developing a taxonomic framework for creativity in higher education context, and share with us the common challenges in the PhD journey and how the challenges could be overcome. So I would like to end the first section by quoting Dr. Chaisen Yu, "Be creative." Okay, so that is the end of the first section. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been walked through a very interesting PhD journey from our 5 distinguished speakers, sharing with us their tenacity, tears, and triumphs. So we are moving on to our question and answer section. So these questions have been taken from those posted on Mentimeter and a Zoom chat. So you still have time to post your questions via the online platform. However, due to the time constraints, okay, we have selected only some of the questions for our speakers. Okay, so first of all, I would like to ask our first speaker, Yulianto Sabat. The first question is that, how did you triangulate your data collection? do data analysis?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the questions. As I've explained before that my research was design-based research, which involved some activities, including the triangulations. But let me explain um, a little bit clearer about the before triangulations. We had another step. So we did what's so called as classroom action research. So classroom action research was conducted to find out whether our model is effective or not. Our model is stable or not. Then after having known that our instructional model has been effective or stable, then we could move on to the next step, what's called as a time triangulation. So in time triangulation, in this case, that the model, the feedback that we've got from the classroom action research, then we improve it. Then in time triangulations, we had our colleagues, or I asked my colleagues to use my instructional model to be used to teach the students in the different class. Then the comment, the feedback, both from the students and the teachers, I wrote to improve my instructional models. So from after having this kind of time triangulation, then I move on to this next level, also called as space triangulation. In space triangulation, then I try out my instructional model in different institutions. While in time triangulation, I conducted in the same institution where I've been working, but in different class and different lectures. But in space triangulation, then I try out my instructional model to the other institution. So my model has been tried out from 3 different universities, from classroom action research, time triangulations, and space triangulation. So this step must be done when we conduct what's called as a design-based research, because we need to make sure that our instructional model is effective and stable, and it can be used for all the subjects in this case. So that's the triangulation process that I did from classroom action research, time triangulation, and space triangulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. And another question for you, Yulianto. What's your suggestion for someone who writes a dissertation proposal for the first time?
Yeah. So in the those who are still writing a proposal for the first time, I still remember some stages when I first wrote my proposal. Then if I could tell or share my experience, then when I first wrote my proposal, my promoter just, give very little feedback at the time, but gave me a lot of references, give me a lot of articles, give me a lot of books. What my promoter said is read, synthesize. So I do agree with the last speaker that's saying persevere and be creative, because you know what, synthesizing is wasn't quite easy. It took much time, but also we need to have very strong self-determination. Otherwise, we will just let our dissertation gone. Okay, so we need to stick on our goal. So the first I wrote my proposal, then feedback was very limited, but the promoter gave me a lot of books, articles to read and synthesize. Then in the next step, I wrote it and I submitted again. There is a little bit more feedback, and the feedback was quite various. Then after that, at the end, much more feedback, but less articles at the time. But in this case, what we needed to do is that just stick on our goals, that we should be optimistic that we could do, strong determinations, and please stick on our goals. That's I can suggest for the one who is writing for the first time. Okay, that's
Thank you very much for your useful tips. Okay, and I believe that everybody keep reading and be creative. For the second speaker, okay, so now it's the time for the second speaker, Valiwat Im Saad. The first question is, do you think typing should be allowed in the writing assessment?
I think it depends on what are you assessing, right? What construct are you assessing? If you focus on creativity, content, or organization, that would be okay to allow typing, right? But if you focus on grammar, spelling, accuracy, and it is one aspect of your assessment criteria, I think construct validity could be an issue. So you need to make sure that typing does not involve, auto correction, right? Sometimes when students type it, Microsoft Word or the application sort of auto corrects that spelling. So I think it depends on your purpose. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Another question for you is that should traditional assessment be replaced by online assessment in the very near future?
This is very challenging question. Well, I don't think so, because I don't think one type of assessment could replace another type, right? We can use any type in your class of assessment. And I think, again, it depends on your purpose and practicality, right? Sometimes traditional assessment seems to be more practical than, an online assessment. For example, some students might not have their devices and we have to adopt sort of traditional assessment. So I think it cannot be replaced soon, right? But in a far future, that might be able to be able to replace, right? Yeah.
Precisely. Yes. Thank you very much for your valuable answers. So now let's move on to the next speaker. Okay, our third speaker, Lukman Maryi. Here's your question. The first one is, how did you ensure the reliability and validity of your research study, which are qualitative in nature?
Yeah, that's a very good question, I would say. So I think this question is very much related to how rigorous your research is, and also something related to transparency. So it depends on so many things, I would say. It could start with the how you design your research and how you collect your data, how you analyze your data, how reflexive you are, for example. And you have to show the transparency of your research to show the reliability. I would say that it would be something related to creditability. So for my research, for example, when I collected data, after I finished my data collection, I also discussed with my participants and show them the transcripts and show them that these were the ones I would use in my study. And, they could have their say. If they prefer to withdraw from the study, they would say so. And also about how you analyze your data and how you need to show the steps, how you analyze your data, and you have to be transparent. And the last one, I would say, which is actually related to my study, is my own reflexivity, because I'm not from the Christian community, and biases are there. My assumptions are there. I came with my own ideological perspective. At first, when I started talking about missionaries, I said that, even though they said the nice thing, maybe they would try to, convince us to be a Christian, and this was something in our head, and we could not control. But what we could do is to be aware of who we are and to be aware of, what research we are doing, and that is very much related to reflexivity in terms of the doing research in qualitative one. And also the last one is to be open-minded, allow yourself to be criticized by others, because it's part of the Watson you said as well, about stay resilient, and it's part of our nature, our culture anyway, that we focus on doing research, and people tell us about the comments so that to get things better. So yes, and I think that's all about it. I'm not sure whether it makes sense, but hopefully it does.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is a thing that we should keep in mind when we conducted qualitative research. Okay, thank you very much. And another question for you, Lukman, what is your opinion on contextualization in English language teaching?
I would say every research is contextualized. So, and then we need to define that very, very carefully. For example, when I talked about Christian organizations, I would need to specify, you know, what Christian is and who there are. You know, do I focus on Christianity or do I focus on language teaching? You know, where that is. And also in qualitative research, when we talk about contextualization, we also talked, we don't seem to focus on whether who's right and who's wrong, but we focus on how context gives us what it should be, and we are the research tool in a way, and we are part of that kind of contextual area. So I would say that we need to define what contextualization really is in our study, and you know, be explicit at it as it should be, you know, because research is not just about controlling, you know, especially when we do the qualitative research, because we're not kind of, you know, staying in the lab. Everything is our control. You know, when we did our research in qualitative in COVID's time, it was something already useful that we could not control the society. We could not control what things are, and what we have to do is just to move things forward.
Thank you very much for your valuable answers. Okay, so the question for our fourth speaker, Dr. Mirbek, can you share with us how to prevent a bias in your research, since the number of the participants are not in a large number?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. I think when it comes to qualitative research, bias, subjectivity, those are the things, big issues. And in its nature, qualitative research is really about the quality, and it doesn't really aim to arrive at some generalizable data. The idea of qualitative research is really to gain insight as deep as possible. And when it comes to the question, how do I deal with bias or subjectivity? I think there is no straight answer, but one thing we can say about it is that we can regulate our own bias as researchers, you know, something called bracketing. I'm not sure if the person who asked this question is familiar with this term, but bracketing basically refers to an activity in which the researcher tries to sort of bracket, put things aside, his own subjectivities, assumptions aside, so that it doesn't really influence the whole activity of research. But again, that's not 100% possible, because we do use our own identities and our own experiences, and our biases penetrate through the whole thing for sure. And I think Luke mentioned today reflexivity. So one way to deal with bias, or another way to deal with it, is also to expose our own reflexivity and to make it clear to the reader that there's a role that the researcher is playing within this study, and this role can be biased as well. But then the researcher is supposed to do everything possible to prevent bias. I hope that answers.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do think that would answer the questions from our participants. Thank you very much. And for Dr. Sun Yu, okay, this is a question for you. Can you give an example of a specific task for creativity that you assign to your students?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So I can give you an example that I used during my research for the last phase of my study. So sorry, that's thunder here, but I hope you can hear me clearly. So the problem solving task that I asked the students to do was one that is open-ended. So what I asked them to do is, I asked them to create or think about how future university will be like. So they can think about it from the perspective of policy, the roles of institution in the future, and how teaching and learning will be taken place in future institution. So this is one of the examples that I actually used for the students. So, but I think there are key features that I need to highlight when it comes to tasks that can help students to express creativity, or that can allow space for students to express creativity. One of the things is that it needs to allow for multiple answers. So that's the first thing, because creativity, that means, you need to allow for different types of answers. It's about divergent thinking. It is not just about convergent thinking. We are thinking about different possibilities. So that's the first feature of task for creativity. And the second thing is that it needs to represent real life situations. We need to get students to solve real life problems. Shouldn't be something that is not realistic. Right? For example, asking students to write a letter, right? Then this is not so realistic right now. Who will write a letter, right? I mean, like, not to say who would not write a letter, but I mean, it is less relevant nowadays in this 21st century. And for example, in a mathematical condition, right? What I found from the study is that in a classroom context, the problem being posed to the students are problems that have a set of answers that the students are supposed to follow. So path A, path B, path C, and then you will arrive at a solution. But it shouldn't be that way. It should be open, where there shouldn't be a fixed answers that you expect from your students. So the three things that I highlight would be, the first is allow for multiple answers. Second is it needs to be real. It needs to be based on real life situations. And the third one is allows for different processes to arrive at the solutions. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your thorough answers, okay, on creativity. And last but not least, everybody, this is the questions for all of you, okay? So please feel free to share your answer. What do you think is the most valuable modality for a PhD student? What could be the most valuable commodity for a PhD student? So anyone, if you would like to be the first one to share the answer, please feel free to do so. Maybe?
In
Yes?
terms of commodity, well, the way I understand this question is basically, what should a PhD student have and use in his academic journey? Well, for me, one thing I used every day and I found it very handy is Evernote. It's an app. I mean, yeah, I used Evernote. I took my notes both when I attended courses and when I did my own research. And it has so many features, and it saves you so much time. It keeps everything organized. And especially if you're doing research, you're going to have a lot of papers to read and store. You're going to take a lot of notes and keep them organized, and you got to be doing a lot of writing. And Evernote really offers you this platform where you can keep everything in one place. And I really, truly enjoyed using Evernote. So that would be my first thing.
Thank you very much. Using Evernote. What about the others?
Let me try. I want to think out of the box, right? I think the most valuable commodity for a PhD student would be time. You need to have time, especially time for focusing on your PhD project, especially those who are working a full-time job, right? So you need to find time to work on your project. So that would be my simple answer. Time.
Excellent. What about the others? Any ideas to share before we end this section?
Yeah. Well, I think what should have for this for phase journey is that persistence, persistence, persistence and self-determination. Although Merbeck has already said about the technology or something else, but if let's say if a no persistence or no self-determination, then it will be a little bit hard for the students to accomplish this hard working. I think that's what I can say.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so to close this session, we would like to once again announce that we have 2 new presidents for AsiaTEFL for the duration of 2022-2024. We had the honor of hearing Professor Jun Kyung Park for the opening speech. And we now like to invite another AsiaTEFL president, Professor Suwasi Madhya, to deliver a closing speech and share with us the missions of AsiaTEFL for the years of 2022 and 2024. Please welcome Professor Madhya.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow, I have enjoyed all the presentation, it's being amazed. And I forget my role. We really enjoy that. And the moderator has been very excellent, in moderating the process. What I have observed is that all of the speakers are really deep thinking about the research studies, sharing what they have done, because you are a student, you're more serious, in thinking that, and we be more careful in deliberating, whatever you think, and try to really go in depth into what you are studying. And almost all will suggest that read and read and read, read and write review and revise, read, write, review, revise. And then that is can be recursive experiences, right? It's recursive, you cannot deny that. And I think the audience, the participants have benefited a lot from the presentations and sessions. And probably the sessions are all the same from the promoter or supervisors, but hearing from the experience of all the presenters here will be really provoking and motivating. And I have noted here that the advice is be organized, make a study plan, this is that one here. And be open-minded, optimistic. But the one thing which means a lot is perseverance. Perseverance is very important. Self-determination, and you have to be persistent. All the same platform there. But I would like to raise one is that be passionate. When you are passionate, you will enjoy. Stay interested, then you will enjoy the intellectual tourism. That's what my term in intellectual tourism. So you enjoy while you are working hard, when you are growing, you have the mindset, growth mindset. And I think, and I would like to thank Professor Prakasit for proposing, the tenacity, tears, and triumph. I wish I were one of these presenters, That's because that's looking back years ago of that. So let's celebrate the today's webinar, and I think if you are interested, please be interested in attending the AsiaTEFL next year, and you can present again the whole lot of your dissertation findings, etc., in more deep discussion. I think that will be good. I think that's all I want to say then. Thank you very much again. Let's celebrate.
Thank you very much, President Madhya, for the insightful and constructive information and shining the light on the pathway for the future of AsiaTEFL. Just a quick reminder that our webinar isn't finished yet. We will let you know about soon about how to get an e-certificate. Just before we go that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our AsiaTEFL Professional Network Committee members who work behind the webinar series 2022. Let's see who they are. So these are 17 committee members from Malaysia and Thailand who have worked together to ensure the webinar series 2022 is conducted successfully. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time that we are delighted to officially announce that the 21st AsiaTEFL International Conference will be held in Daejeon, South Korea on the 17th to 20th of August 2023. The conference theme is Celebrating ELT in Asia, Visions and Aspirations. So let's enjoy the short clip. Sounds excited, right? Sounds exciting, right? So the call for presentation proposals will be posted on our website soon. Please stay tuned and visit our website, www.asiatefl.org, or our Facebook page, AsiaTEFL Association, for more information and updates. Now it's time to proceed to the group photo section. Thank you everyone for the delightful interactions face-to-face and in the chat rooms. We'd like to take some pictures before we end the section. So could you please switch on your cameras so we can take some great photos together? Okay. And please feel free to give us a very beautiful smile from all around the world. Please feel free to turn on your camera. Yeah, it's very nice to see so many of you attending this webinar today. And this is ensure that we celebrate the diversity, okay, and the vibrance of ELT from many people from all around the world. Okay. So I will be the camera woman. Okay, I will capture on 3, everybody. Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, so please wait because there are 6 pages. So please wait. Okay, I will move on to the next page. Okay, on 3, everybody. 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay, so I will move to the 3rd page. Okay, on 3, 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. Okay, so let's move on to the 4th page since there are a number of participants here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let me move to the 5th page. 1, 2, 3. Last but not least, okay. Again, smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Okay, it's a pleasure to see so many faces and familiar faces, okay, in the webinar. So now it's time that you are waiting for, okay? Before we move to the e-certificates, once again, a great thanks to our speakers for your wonderful presentation, your contribution, and your time. Of course, thanks to our wonderful participants to actively engage with this webinar with lots of questions and feedbacks. Thank you. Now it's time that you are waiting for e-certificates. As I informed you earlier, we are happy to issue an e-certificate to all of you who have been attending this webinar. As you can see on the screen, the link and the QR code are displayed. Okay, so please use your device to either enter the link or scan the QR code. The link is provided in the chat box, okay, if you cannot scan the QR code on the screen. And this link will direct you to an e-form, which you can put your details in the link. So please note that the e-form is now open and it will disappear with 15 minutes. So please complete it now. And we are also here with you to answer your questions about the e-certificates too, if you have. Our e-certificate is computer generated based on what you have keyed into the form. So please ensure that your email address is correct. And all the spaces and dots and symbols are correct. This is to ensure that we can send it to you to the correct email address. Please be sure that you can write down your name and your email address clearly, so we will not be reissuing any e-certificates in case of spelling errors. And so please double check your name and email address before sending it to us. That would be appreciated. Your certificates will be emailed to you within 2 weeks. Once the e-certificates have been sent, we will send out a notification email to everyone who registers for the event. You will need to let us know by a certain date in case you do not receive your certificate. Please be patient as we are taking time to ensure accuracy. Thank you very much. Okay. I hope that all of you have scanned the link or saved the link. Okay, so you will have 15 minutes to fill in the form to get e-certificate. Okay, so for those who have completed all the form, well done. You will receive an e-certificate soon. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the section. On behalf of AsiaTEFL Professional Network Committee, we'd like to thank you everyone again for your participation and your contribution. Please be reminded that you all are encouraged to submit your proposal to the 21st AsiaTEFL International Conference. We are looking forward to meeting you in Daejeon, South Korea, and seeing you in the next AsiaTEFL webinar series project. Please stay tuned and visit our website for more information and updates. Stay safe, everyone, and take care. Bye for now.